Hey Reluctant Preppers, this is showing you just how easy it is to purchase silver without paying any premium over spot price. You just go to sdbullion.com/RP, scroll down and enter the special code to get silver without any premium, and they'll mail it to your mailbox, discreetly packaged. Inside you'll find a beautiful 10-ounce bar of fine silver, and you are able to purchase that and have it and add it to your stack and your collection without paying any premium. And you're supporting Reluctant Preppers along the way. Thanks.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. It's our privilege to have a second-time returning guest tonight. Jim Rawles, the founder and senior editor of Survival Blog, is here with us again on Reluctant Preppers. He's founded one of the most popular and highly rated prepping sites in the world. He is here with us to talk about a couple of topics. One is misconceptions and myths about preppers and prepping. The other is about investing in tangibles. James, thanks for joining us here again on Reluctant Preppers.
Thanks for having me on.
So this is our second time to have you, and I'm glad that we were able to arrange this visit. I was hoping we could get your perspective, since you've been in contact with probably thousands and thousands of, actually tens of thousands of preppers over the years. The very active blog means there's lots of give and take, two-way information sharing, both from you and other experts, as well as from common, ordinary individuals who are putting their best thoughts forward. So there's been plenty of crowd testing of a lot of these ideas, people giving feedback based on their different perspectives. So these are not just one person's one-dimensional ideas that we'll be talking about.
That's right. That's one of the beauties of Survival Blog, is that it really is kind of a crowd source of knowledge. We've got thousands and thousands of people all over the world with very diverse backgrounds and a tremendous base of knowledge that far, far exceeds my own. And I really feel blessed to have all that information on tap.
So in light of that, we thought we'd take a look with you at what are some of the biggest fallacies or myths about preppers, preparedness-minded people, or preparedness actions, priorities, and so-called facts that may be misunderstandings or misnomers. So if we could let's start about preppers themselves. In your experience, could you start thinking of what are the one or two or three most outstanding misconceptions about preppers that you're aware of that are out there?
Well, certainly in the mass media, we are misunderstood. But even within the prepping world, I think a lot of people get off on the wrong foot, and they tend to overemphasize one particular area in their prepping. And I see this most often with folks who come from a medical background. They tend to put everything in their preps and have it revolve around medical preparedness, often at the expense of having a basic 1 or 2 year food supply for their family. They might be prepared for minor surgery, if not practically major surgery, on their in their living room. But if you don't have a couple of years' supply of food set aside, you've really shortchanged yourself. So again, people tend to overemphasize particular areas. I see the same thing with ham radio operators. They have every communication bell and whistle imaginable, but again, they will be either underarmed or underfed, or they usually tend to overlook one or other particular area of preparedness.
Sounds like what you're saying is the importance of balance and proper priorities within the things that you stockpile.
Right. What it all comes down to is having balance and having a set of preps that is appropriate for your budget appropriate for your terrain, appropriate for your climate zone, and appropriate for your stage of life and your health. And if people can't be objective about that, they're really doing themselves and their children a disservice. Because if you can't be objective, if you can't be well balanced, you're going to end up with lopsided preparedness or preparedness that really isn't appropriate for where you live, for example, or for your stage of life. A lot of people ask me about building rural retreats, but if someone is already in their 60s, say, and they're just getting started with the whole thought of buying a rural retreat and building it up and stocking it and establishing fruit and nut trees and a big garden and orchard and all that, I really have to tell them, hey, wait a second. Either you need to team up with someone a lot younger who has, the strength and the ability to do that, or you need to seriously rethink what you're doing.
Yeah, you're making me smile here because my wife and I have kind of got a tug of war going through the years when neither one of us will get the bug to stock up on a certain kind of thing. Then that if it doesn't come right away to the other one will question it sometimes persistently, and it'll become a bone of contention until we finally realize, it's just a different way of looking at things. I often will have this bug about stocking up on paper goods, paper towels, toilet paper, Kleenexes, stuff like that. So why are you buying all this stuff? And my comeback is always, it never goes out of freshness. You're always, you're going to use it. And then recently we've both been dealing with some pretty serious health concerns, and we've been purchasing and ordering a lot of herbal supplements and nutritional supplements and that sort of things online. And sometimes we didn't check with each other, so we both ordered the same thing, so we ended up with more than we expected to and that kind of thing. And sometimes if I come out like, why, look at this, we got drawers full of this, what do you got this stuff? And then she'll look at me and she knows now there's this one word that can just disarm me with, and she'll say, honey, I'm preparing. And then she knows I'm not gonna complain after that. So,
right. And in some ways, overstocking a particular item, at least if it's something non-perishable, really is not that major a mistake, because as long as you're not stocking up beyond your ability to use that within its shelf life, and you have the space for it, then all you've really done is kind of misallocate funds. And if it's something that is valuable as a barter good or that will be useful for charity, then the fact that you're overstocked is actually a good thing. And you just don't want to be completely out of balance to the point where you have so much of something and lack other critical supplies where you would be forced to barter to even out your supplies. That's kind of an unenviable position to be in.
That's right. That gets back to the balance that you're talking about. And when you mention stage of life, I'm thinking the same thing. We're getting up there, closer to retirement age, that sort of thing. And when you started talking about establishing nut trees and large gardens and that sort of thing, you really had me pegged, I think, because some of the gardening that we've started has been real small scale, and then there's how much time do you really have to pay attention to it and care for it, and it really is a commitment, and it's something that some of those things really do take time to develop, and they aren't just overnight, and your skill development has to go with it as well. So that really struck home when you mentioned that.
For every tool and every piece of logistics, there's a learning curve. And you need to have not just stuff, but skills to go with them. Or, when you have just goods on hand and those skills to match, you really haven't done yourself a favor at all.
So that's a big area there is you've actually mentioned two major things here. One is having an out of balance set of preps that may be inappropriate for your budget, your terrain, your climate, your stage of life and health. That's one major prepping mistake. And the second one is overemphasizing the particular area of maybe your familiarity or your specialty. Reminds me of one of those posters you see where it's the world as seen from, wherever, Chicago, whatever, and everything that's near to you is really big and in great detail, and everything else is tiny and small because it's far away and it seems insignificant. So those are two major prepping mistakes. What's another major prepping mistake that is easy for people to fall into?
Oh, there's plenty of them. I guess the other one would be the company you keep. I often hear from my consulting clients and from my readers these horror stories about how they really revealed too much to friends, neighbors, coworkers, and now regret what they've revealed about their preparations. They did so in the hopes that it would either inspire someone to get prepared themselves or inspire someone to team up with them. And what they've actually done is create an adversarial situation or a situation where you have someone that only intends to leech off of you if everything falls apart. So OPSEC, I think, would be another key consideration and a key pitfall. You really need to be circumspect about what you tell and to whom and the timing of all of that. Because if you're in a situation where you want to add someone to your circle of trusted friends, or say you're actually building a full-blown retreat group, you really need to go very slowly, very cautiously, and do not lay all of your cards on the table, because you never know if it's someone that you just met through the internet or through an acquaintance or through a social club or whatever. You may actually have a sociopath sitting on the other side of the table from you and not realize it. And you really need to go slowly, proceed with caution, proceed with prayer, and be very circumspect. Only reveal as much information as is necessary. It's basically like the military or the intelligence need to know rule. If they don't have a need to know it, you really shouldn't reveal it.
You used a term halfway through that. You said OPSEC, and some people here might not be familiar with that.
OPSEC is a military acronym which stands for Operational Security. And it's basically keeping your mouth shut when it comes right down to it, or curtailing your patterns of operation so that they don't create a recognizable signature. So, for example, if you're making umpteen trips to Costco and your neighbors see you doing that, or if you have the UPS truck arriving at your house daily and package after package after package being dropped off, that's an OPSEC signature just in itself.
You got me cracking up again here because I'm thinking about the last time we did go to Costco. We had heard that there was a potential water main break in the area and some concern about water quality that hadn't been announced to the public. And I was thinking about another preparedness expert, Brad Harris from Full Spectrum Survival we had on, and his slogan, he said, was that remember that the official warning will always come too late. And so I had loaded up a flatbed cart with, I don't know, maybe half a dozen cases of water. It was nothing too outlandish. You see that all the time at Costco. And we're going out the door, and the security checker lady who makes sure that you don't have more than what's on your receipt as you head out the door there looked at our cart and she said, "Oh, expecting need some water, huh?" And he said, "Yeah." And she said, she says, I don't want to say this too loud. I can't remember how she introduced it, but it really got my attention. My ears perked up. She said, my son-in-law works for the Army Corps of Engineers, and he knows a lot of time what's going on before a lot of other people do about things like this. She says he just had a pallet of water delivered to his house for whatever that means. And then she went ahead and checked us out, and we were heading out to the car. And I'm thinking, well, that was interesting.
Well, my friend Bob Griswold, who runs a company called Ready Made Resources, one of my longtime advertisers on my blog, is fond of saying, panic early and beat the rush.
Yeah, that's right. It's almost like contrarian investing, when value investors are buying stocks in companies when everybody else has become disinterested in them or thinks they're of no value or thinks they're of no interest. That's when it's like you're always looking stupid. You're always doing what looks stupid. I guess that's what Noah looked like when he was building the ark too. And that's when the time when the supplies are plentiful, the prices are low, and you're not as likely to be, drawing a lot of attention to yourself than we had it a different situation when there actually was a water crisis and there was rationing of water. You could only purchase so many cases per trip, that kind of thing. So you're absolutely right. By the time you're sure you need it, you won't be the first one, and it's too late.
You don't want to be the proverbial third guy in line. The same thing applies to finances as well. You mentioned contrarian investing. I tend toward contrarianism, and I think there's a lot of value in it, because if you take the time to study markets very carefully and you time markets properly and you see opportunities that exist that are overlooked, then you could be in the position to make a very handsome profit. But it takes research, it takes being open-minded, and you don't want to buy into your own personal preferences. You need to be rational, level-headed. You need to be basically dispassionate about investing. Many, many times with my consulting clients, I've seen that they have just this bizarre portfolio
accumulated. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, accumulated. Yeah, they've picked out a portfolio that seems wildly overinvested in certain areas. Like, I had one consulting client who had like almost half of his net worth in colored gemstones. I just had to say, well, wait a minute. If you're planning on an economic collapse, I can't think of a less liquid investment to try to turn over in the midst of a collapse. If you have precious metals, those are easily recognizable for their value. But with colored gemstones, you're looking at like a subset of jewelers that might be interested in them. I asked, what was the big fascination? He said, I just really like them. They're pretty.
Oh, no.
It's like, holy cow. Well, luckily he had bought years and years ago a lot of it, and he was able to liquidate and make a very tidy profit on a lot of these gemstones. And I encouraged him to diversify into silver, a bit into platinum. In fact, right now I'm pointing people more toward platinum than I am gold, because right now you can buy platinum for the same price or less than gold. And historically, platinum sells at a large premium over gold. And I think in the long term, it will return to its historic norm. So I was able to get him into some platinum, some silver, some common caliber ammunition, and a few other things, where now he's at least has a reasonable allocation of his portfolio. But it's just, I see it over and over again, where people tend to let their emotions rule their investing. And if anything should be dispassionate, it should be investing. You can't become emotionally attached to a particular investment. When the light says sell, you sell. You don't dawdle. You don't hang on. You don't hang. I've had consulting clients tell me that they didn't want to sell a particular hedge fund because they didn't want to offend the hedge fund manager, didn't want to hurt his feelings. It's like, wow. So yeah, you really need to be dispassionate about your investing.
Investing in tangibles was another topic we wanted to roll on to, and I guess I'll circle back right at the end about attitudes about preppers themselves. But as long as we're on the topic of investing, you mentioned in passing common caliber ammo. And I think I've heard you speaking in another interview about how that actually can vary regionally. So again, you shouldn't assume to what you're personally attached to, or, because I have this one gun that I got from my uncle so-and-so and it needs that, therefore I have to stock up on that. Yeah, you probably need a supply of that, but if you're talking about a barter good, what are some of the considerations you need to take into on making sure you're picking the right caliber for where you live?
Right. There definitely are some regional favorites. And here in the United States, I would recommend that you research through the local gun shops what are the most common calibers used for deer hunting, and what are the common calibers used by law enforcement. Because in a lot of cases, the local police department, the sheriff's department, or the local gendarmes, the Fish and Wildlife Service people, or whoever that's local to your area, you need to find out what their duty issue caliber and weapon is. So if you're going to stock up on extra ammunition, for handgun ammunition, for example, you better have at least a decent supply of that same caliber ammunition in your stockpile.
What's the logic you're following there? Help us understand the connection you're making on that last one.
Sure. Well, like say your local police department issues pistols chambered in .40 Smith & Wesson, but all your guns are 9mm or 45 automatics. You want to have some extra ammunition in that local law enforcement caliber, because you want to be in a position where you can either dispense that ammunition charitably or be in a position where you can barter with that ammunition. Because that's going to make you want to be seen as the indispensable guy in the community. And the first group of people that you want to see you in that light is local law enforcement. You want to be known as the go-to guy, not somebody to be feared or worried about. You want to be seen as an asset, a resource, not part of the problem.
Any thoughts on how you don't let how you can influence that? We were talking earlier about keeping a low profile. Here we're talking about being known as the go-to guy. But if people just see you as a barrier between them and the stockpile of the valuable asset that they want, how do you influence that perception from shifting?
You want to be on good terms personally with the law enforcement officers. So if it's ever an absolute worst case situation, and orders come down from on high to start seizing stockpiles of food or ammunition or fuel or whatever, if you have those personal relationships that are well established, I think they will hopefully pass you by, because they'll want to keep you in mind as a personal barter asset rather than someone just as a resource to be harvested.
Okay, so back to the topic of investing in tangibles. You mentioned in passing platinum at a rare low premium or even a discount currently to gold. You mentioned silver in brief passing. We've certainly had a lot of people visiting our channel. David Morgan, known as the Silver Guru. We've had Gregor Manarino from TradersChoice.net. We've had a whole raft of others on here just beating the table for a couple of years, talking about the historic distortion of the gold-silver ratio. So our listeners are very familiar with the relative, well, actually, you could even in absolute terms, the absolute cheapness of silver right now, and also its relative cheapness compared to gold. Can you expand on any aspect of that other than just that one topic?
Yes, I'm a big believer in silver, and as a prepper, I much prefer silver over gold and platinum, because gold and platinum are really too compact a form of wealth for practical barter. You have too much wealth tied up in one half-ounce gold coin, for example, to make it practical for barter, unless you end up bartering using a cold chisel. So I much prefer silver, because if your goal is to be able to go out and buy, say, a gallon of kerosene or a few cans of beans, then silver dimes and quarters make a lot of sense for barter. A 1/2 ounce Krugerrand or American Eagle makes no sense at all. Now, to get back to silver and its relative value to gold, what you have to understand is that the amount of silver and gold in the earth is a fixed ratio. The amount of silver that's produced as a byproduct of mining gold is almost a fixed ratio. the current gold to silver spot price ratio is completely out of whack relative to those first two numbers. And whenever you see a commodity that is outside of historic norms, it usually represents a buying opportunity one way or the other, because you know that in the long term, any given commodity is going to return to the historic mean or close to it. In the case of silver versus gold, from a monetary standpoint, the ratio back in the 19th century was 16 to 1. Right now, we're 70 something to 1? So I think it's a really good time to buy silver. I think it's ridiculously low in terms of dollar price to obtain physical silver. And I think that given the long-term trend wherein most gold that's used industrially and in electronics is recovered, whereas most silver that's used industrially and in electronics is not recovered. That points me to the realization that in the long term, the ratio of silver to gold is going to be more like 10 to 1 because silver is being used up and gold isn't.
Returning to the discussion about ammunition briefly, any guidelines for people on how long-lived, how viable, in storage, any storage tips, that kind of thing? Is there any concern about maintaining the goodness of stored ammo?
Right. I'm a big believer in military surplus ammo cans. Just make sure that you're buying the real deal and they still have their rubber seals in good condition. And if they are starting to look a little bit white on the black rubber seals, then you want to wipe those down with Vaseline. And as long as you have a can that doesn't rust through, you have the capability with standard military surplus ammo cans of storing ammunition multi-generationally. Literally 150 years from now, someone could crack open one of the cans that I put away full of ammunition, and every round is going to go bang. So unless something changes radically in the way that powder or primers are formulated, with modern stiff-nate primers, which are the modern non-corrosive primers, we can expect at least 150-year life out of ammunition that's stored in an airtight container that's relatively free of moisture. And the way you make sure it's free of moisture is to throw a small silica gel bag in with each container. And if you can't find silica gel prepackaged, there is a brand of cat litter called Fresh Step, which is silica gel. Just get unscented Fresh Step cat litter, and that's all it is silica gel. And you're buying it in bulk at an incredibly low price. You could buy it in a 3 or 5 pound bag for literally a tenth of what you would pay for silica gel in packets. And then you can seal that in filter paper. Just take coffee filters and some silica gel, fold over all the corners, and either glue or staple the edges shut, and you have your own silica gel packets. You throw one packet of about 1 ounce into each 30 or 50 caliber size ammo can. That will suck up any of the ambient moisture that's there as you seal the can up. Once that moisture is trapped in the silica gel, again, you'll have about 150-year shelf life on ammunition, possibly longer.
Other investing intangibles than platinum, silver, and lead that we're talking about?
I'm a big believer in having a very well-balanced portfolio of tangibles. I like hand tools, guns, ammunition, maybe a few optics and a few electronics, but the prices of those seem to be falling gradually. So, you don't, especially with electronics, it's like catching a falling knife. You don't want to invest in electronics right now above and beyond your own personal family needs, because in 5 or 10 years, not only is what you're buying probably going to be obsolete, it'll probably be 1/5 or 1/10 as valuable. That's not an investment. That's an anti-investment. So I'm a big believer in silver, common caliber ammunition, top quality firearms that are usable for both self-defense and hunting. Full capacity magazines are a great investment. It's something that might end up being banned and grandfathered. And in that case, you would reap a huge profit on any magazines that you've stocked up on. I believe in stocking up on fuel in barterable size containers. So I'm a big believer in kerosene, for example, but you want to buy it in 1 gallon or 2 gallon cans and then store that in a dry place at a safe distance from your house, say in a detached shed or like a paint shed. I think that would be a fantastic barter item. It's something that most people have overlooked. Your average family has less than a gallon of kerosene on hand at any given time. And if we get into a grid down collapse situation, kerosene will practically be worth its weight in gold. Another thing that's often overlooked for barter, for anyone who lives outside of coastal areas, is salt. I'm a big believer in stocking up on salt. People will need it for preserving food. They'll also need it for attracting wild game because everyone's going to want to be hunting. And what better way to hunt than have a salt block in your backyard? So stock up on salt, especially if you live in a non-coastal area.
Any other tangibles that come to mind, or is that a good starter list?
Beyond the ones that preppers are interested in, just in terms of a store of value, I think that people should consider diversifying into things like rare stamps, rare coins rather than bullion coins. And there I'm talking anywhere from, say, AU-58 to MS-65 or even 66 level slabbed, like PCGS or NGC slabbed small gold coins or silver dollars or half dollars. And then perhaps even things, if you've got the storage space, even things like classic cars, because a classic car, a pre-1970s car, is something that's very easy to work on and that's EMP proof and that will probably hold its value quite well if you buy it right. You need to buy one that's already restored, that has true collector appeal, and that culturally is always going to be desirable. You know, if you end up buying a Mustang, say from the mid-1960s, you really can't go wrong.
Yeah, you're better with a Mustang than a Gremlin.
Right, yeah. I'm not a big believer in AMC products. The only AMC I would actually look for is there's actually a few models of the AMC Eagle which were made in very small numbers, which actually have a little bit of collector appeal, and it's a four-wheel drive vehicle. That's the only AMC vehicle I would consider buying, but I'm a big believer in pre-1974 big block Detroit steel with big heavy chrome bumpers. You really can't go wrong. The bigger the engine displacement, the better from a collector standpoint. And you want to look at the absolute rarity of that car as well. If you go to the Hemmings website or any of the other big car websites, they actually have links that'll bring you to web pages that show the actual production numbers of various models of cars. And some of these numbers are surprisingly low. And in the long term, I think that's where the real appreciation is going to be, is in the low production cars that, especially for muscle cars, that are going to be recognized in the long term for their real rarity.
And then the last section, if we could circle back, which we just blushed on at the beginning, was basically societal attitudes towards preparedness-minded people. We've even had a story recently where, following the Las Vegas massacre, there was mainstream media talking about people who own multiple rifles or multiple types of guns, that sort of thing, as being potential risks to society. So that's one hot topic. But are there other, maybe you want to expand on that, or also introduce other misconceptions about preppers that may be harbored in our culture?
Yeah, the Eastern liberal urban view of preppers is really distorted. They think that we're a bunch of rednecks that live out in the middle of nowhere and that distill moonshine and are married to our first cousin, and that we own 57 guns and that we're hostile to the world. That's their view. Couldn't be farther from the truth. Most of the people who read my blog are very well-adjusted individuals. A lot of them are professionals. A lot of them, I would say, are just everyday working folks who recognize the fragility of society. They recognize the fact that the government is woefully underprepared, so they're preparing themselves. It's just common sense. Now, because we live in a world that's media-driven, and because the media can turn on a particular group of people in a heartbeat, like a pack of vicious hounds. I mean, just look what's going on in Hollywood right now, for example, where they're one step away from a full-blown witch hunt in Hollywood right now. Probably rightfully so, because the casting couch and the casting crib really has been the order of the day in Hollywood for so many years. They're just really catching up with, their own skeletons in the closet. But the media can turn on any group at any time. And as preppers, we have to recognize that we're particularly vulnerable because a lot of us homeschool our children. We believe in home birth. We're generally opposed to vaccination. We're heavily invested in precious metals. We have large gun collections. And we have particular skill sets that the mass media might see as dangerous. So we have to be very circumspect about our preparations, and we have to order our lives in a way that basically, I don't want to say a full gray man or life submerged, but close to it, where your public persona is absolutely vanilla, where the only thing you would have on Facebook is, what you had for dinner the other night, where you went to the restaurant, or your favorite sports teams, that sort of thing. You would never in social media mention anything relating to prepping, because everything you post in social media essentially is forever. And what you write about now might be perfectly acceptable and legal, but in the future it might be considered anathema and even illegal. So keep your public persona as plain Jane, milquetoast, vanilla as possible, and keep any conversations about prepping strictly on the QT, where you would only be either speaking face-to-face with someone or using good old-fashioned snail mail. Any electronic communication, any emails, anything over the telephone, and certainly anything in social media, you should never breathe a word about being a prepper.
In your life, you have a very public placement of yourself, and so does your partner on survivalblog.com. So how do you guys deal with that?
Well, I actually live under an assumed identity, and that's not very well known, but none of my neighbors know that I'm a prepper, or even that I'm a novelist, or that I'm a blogger. I'm just Jim and the telecommuter. That's all they know. And I don't want to go into the details because I don't want to put myself at risk, but I took that approach because I recognized that given the high profile of my blog, I have over 400,000 people read my blog on a fairly regular basis. I'm in a kind of a unique situation where that if everything did fall apart, I could wake up some morning and find my barnyard full of RVs, tents, teepees, and yurts because everyone would decide that my ranch was the safest place in North America to be. So I don't even mention what state I live in. And again, I live under an assumed identity locally simply because I can't afford that risk to my family.
When people have wondered on this channel why I'm not facing the camera in the photo, it's for the same reason. I've seen, and it's becoming increasingly impressive, the capabilities of facial recognition. We have various, now it's so easy when you get a new phone, or when it's just automatically you can just connect to your iCloud account or your Google Drive or whatever and upload all this unlimited storage for free, and all your photos go up there and they're cataloged and document your whole life so easily and share it, and it's all very well and good. But when they're able to immediately pick out via facial recognition AI software what your identity is from any picture of you, even when people have like their kids are in their Halloween costumes, some of them I've seen, and it's still picking out their identity. It's just really getting more and more sophisticated. So any amount of caution in that regard is certainly respectable and warranted for people who would prefer to keep a low profile.
I concur 100%. And if I had to do it all over again, I would have started writing under a pen name. As it turned out, I had to turn my original name into a pen name.
Yep. So other urban myths about preppers. You talked about the view of preppers as backwards, ignorant, antisocial, a risk to society, that sort of thing. Anything else that stands out that you find is a complete misconception about the nature or the identity of preppers?
Well, I think the biggest misconception is that preppers somehow in the midst of a societal collapse are going to be some kind of predatory threat. But in actuality, it's the people who haven't prepared who are going to be the threat because they're going to be desperate. If I have a 2-year supply of food set aside for my family, I'm not part of the problem. I'm part of the solution. In fact, I don't look at that as a 2-year supply for one family. I look at that as a 1-year supply for 2 families, or you could extrapolate from there. So rather than being someone predatory and being part of a problem, we're actually part of the solution. And I think that's a huge, huge misconception that I don't really expect the leftist mainstream media to ever break itself from. And it's just something that we have to live with.
Yeah, I actually had a person on recently. We interviewed, I believe it was Ann Barnhart, talking about that the most consistent thing that will happen from the mainstream media regarding preppers in the case of following a collapse will be that they will be called hoarders and blamed for having precipitated a financial collapse, because you see, if it was all these people stopping the velocity of goods and services in the economy by hoarding gold and silver and goods, that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, that's hardly the case, because what I stockpiled in the way of food and precious metals 2 years ago is not part of the current pipeline of the economy. That's history. That's ancient history. And so, in fact, what I have stockpiled represents the fact that I'm going to be one less person who's rushing to the grocery store at the 11th hour. So I'm part of the solution, not part of the problem.
Yeah, and in fact, you have official guidelines, which is eye-opening, coming from FEMA, coming from other governments as well, advising their populaces to have a stockpile, to be prepared, to plan that the official sources of relief are not going to be there when you need them.
In fact, if our government were to be psychologically analyzed, it would be seen as schizoid, because one agency of government, the FEMA, is encouraging everyone to have at least a 6-month supply of food on hand. Another agency, the Department of Homeland Security, has profiled anyone who has 6 months worth of food on hand as a potential terrorist, literally. So we have a strange duality. We actually have a schizoid personality for our government at this point. And as we mentioned earlier, it is prudent to be very quiet about your crops.
Well, Jim, we're running short on time. Before we let you go, can you just remind people where they can find you and what they will find when they get there?
Sure. Again, I'm the founder and senior editor of survivalblog.com. It's the oldest and biggest blog site on the internet on family preparedness. We have almost 40,000 archived articles and letters and columns on preparedness on a huge range of subjects. It's all available free. It's fully searchable. I recommend that your listeners print out the most important articles and at least selectively go through and fill up a memory stick with the articles that you think would be of use to you and your family. Again, it's free of charge. There is no super secret members only area on the site. It's all free of charge. It's all fully searchable. Please take full advantage of it, folks. Again, it's survivalblog.com.
Well, James Wesley Rawles, founder and senior editor of survivalblog.com, thanks once again for joining us on Reluctant Preppers. You have such a depth and breadth of information. We're going to have you back again because we've got a lot of other questions we didn't get to tonight. So just thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me on, and God bless you and all your listeners. I pray the 91st Psalm for all of you.
Thank you, Jim.